You're listening to the Becoming Zesty podcast. We are Megan and Dr. Alex, and we're so happy that you're here.
We are passionate about accelerated transformation, yours, ours, and the collective.
Personal and professional for coaches, practitioners, and leaders of all kinds.
Between the two of us, we seem to have done things the painful way. So let our pitfalls become your stepping stones. We are not afraid to share our raw and vulnerable truths in order to help you transform your thinking, your body, your heart, and your soul.
Combining over 15 years of functional medicine with brain-based habit change to lead you to create the life of your dreams, supporting yourself through all four bodies, physical, mental, emotional, and energetic, every step of the way.
We are transformation accelerators, wholeness cultivators, empowerment experts, speakers, authors, mentors, and change makers for a more loving world. By combining Dr. Alex's MD experiences
with Megan's mindset magic, we've helped hundreds of thousands of people transform their lives, and we can help you too. If you're ready to accelerate your transformation and have so much fun doing it, then stick around. We've got you covered. Quick reminder, this information is not meant to diagnose, manage, or treat disease. Always consult with your doctor, not this doctor, before making changes. Now let's get into today's episode.
Well, hello there. Welcome back to the ZESTY podcast. This is Megan here. And you all are in for a treat. I just got to interview Eli from The Attachment Nerd. If you've been around for a while or if you're one of my friends, then I've told you, go check her out. She's amazing. She has such an awesome Instagram that just pulled me right in. Super educating and entertaining at the same time. So go check her out at Attachment Nerd. And you're going to want to stay for this whole interview because she really breaks down the 4 attachment styles. And you don't have to be a parent for this. This is about what your attachment style is that you got and developed growing up, and that they are then affecting how you interact with other people. And whether you easily lean in and are able to support someone, or whether you pull away, whether you're avoidant, whether you're dismissive, whether you're resistant, all the good stuff. There was so many more things I wanted to ask her, and I saved all my personal questions for the very end because I had a really nasty review once from someone saying I asked too many personal questions in an interview. And while I actually don't care about that anymore because it's our podcast, I did save my personal questions for the very, very end, although I believe they relate to everyone. So check it out. Eli Harwood. She's a licensed therapist, author, and educator who has more than 17 years of experience helping people process relational traumas and develop secure attachment relationships with their children and their partners. Eli has 3 children, 1 husband, 1 cat, and an extraordinary number of plants. That must be why I loved her from the beginning. You are going to want to listen to this. I'm in her membership. I've just binged all of her information. It's helped me with my children. It's helped me with my partner. And really, most of all, it's helped with clients. So what she's talking about is what we do at our NLP trainings, where we go deep, deep, deep into helping people reprogram these events. These events she's talking about that happened and are playing a really big role in now how we process current life and how we relate to people, which of course, changes our whole experience of life, right? Yeah. She just wrote a book, Securely Attached. Actually, it's more of a workbook. So I'll make sure that's in the show notes. Y'all are going to want to go find it. And if you are ready to dig in much deeper with us, the next place where you can join us in person is going to be our 2-day event in Virginia Beach, January 19th and 20th, we are going to go deep into understanding habits, and not just habits of like put your shoes by the door to work out, but habits from an identity level of who you're being. And your identity is going to be shaped by these attachments. So I suggest you get her workbook, and I suggest you join us in January for 2 days of amazingness, community, connection. We're going to end with a healing sound bath. I'd love, love, love to see you in person. We'd love to give you a squeeze and just really go deeper into what are those ideal habits, the ideal habits that will get us the life that we want and love, the business that we want and love, the coaching clients that we know we are here to help and have not yet allowed ourselves to reach. We're holding ourselves back because we're operating in some of these patterns. So check out the episode. I would love for you to share on Instagram. If you want to take a screenshot, if you want to tag us, you'll hear at the very end, Eli shares how if you do pre-order her book, which is, there's not much time left because she said 3 weeks when we recorded it. So it might only be 1 or 2 weeks by the time this is live, that there is a bonus 50% off of her membership and program. So if this information is calling you like it was to me, you gotta run and get it. All right. Cannot wait to hear your feedback. Thanks for being here. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Becoming Zesty podcast. I am so happy to have you here. And I'm even more excited to have an amazing guest today, Eli. Welcome to the podcast, Eli.
Thank you so much. I'm so glad to be here.
So I want to share a quick backstory, and I haven't even told you this, but this is how amazing your content is. And I didn't even know your name because I tell everybody, go find the attachment nerd on Instagram.
Make me cry, and it's not even barely the morning still.
So I have a business partner, as everyone listening knows, and we share an Instagram account, right? So she sometimes finds and follows people, however she found it. And so she found you, and I'm like, oh, look, we're following somebody. Something popped up in my feed. And I think I spent probably the next hour watching your videos. I went to your website. I watched every free training you had on there. And then I joined your membership all within 1 day. So I just wanted to say that was very impressive. You have amazing content, and I've gotten even more benefit from being in your membership. So thank you.
I am so happy to hear that. Because, when you're creating these resources, you think, I hope this will be helpful. I hope it makes a difference, but you never totally know.
Oh, yes. I 100% feel that and understand that. So a little more backstory so everyone can get to know you who has not followed my advice and gone to follow you yet. Just tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Absolutely. So I'm a therapist. I have been practicing psychotherapy for almost 2 decades, 17 years. And I have a passion around attachment. And my passion around attachment comes from my own journey, my own story, my own process of growing up in a home where my relationships with my parents were both categorized, according to the research, insecure. And so I had a journey to find a sense of deeply rooted, secure sense of self, and to learn how to relate in my close relationships with a more secure pattern. And that led me into being a therapist, and that process led me into helping people with this. And at some point, a couple of years back, I think it was 2022, I thought people need to know this information. And the information that's out there is pretty obtuse. If you want to pick up a book on attachment, you're either going to fall asleep or your brain is going to hurt because you're like, what? Ambivalent? What does this all mean? So I thought, well, I can do this. I've been doing this for a long time with people, helping them understand the nitty gritty. Here's what you need to know. Here's how you heal this. Here's what it looks like. And I started running my mouth on the internet. And I also am a fairly theatrical person. So social media was a really great fit for me. I was like, oh, this is fun. This is like playtime. I can play dress up. I can send out important messages. So that's when Attachment Nerd was born. with my long-term lifelong goal that as many people as possible will have the opportunity to understand attachment and develop a secure pattern. And then that's evolved over time into a lot of other resources. And I am a few weeks out from my book going live, which I'm so excited
Congratulations.
about. But yeah, so the best way to describe me is I truly am an attachment nerd in my personal life, in my work life. I'm a mama of 3. I have been with my partner now for 18 years. Is that right? Something like that. No, yeah, for sure. I have to like do the math. Anyway, a long, long time. And have just been so blessed to have had the opportunity to heal some really painful relational wounds in my life. And I want everybody in the whole world to get to do the same thing.
Thank you for sharing that. It's every relationship really where this is going to come into play, because I know some of our listeners have children, some of our listeners don't, and I'm saying at some point you were a child, so this is going to apply to everyone in every relationship.
That's part of why I'm so passionate about it. It's like, oh, you're having a problem with your partner? Well, let's talk about attachment stuff. Oh, you're having a deep issue with a close friend. Let's talk about attachment stuff. You're having a hard time with your children. Let's talk about attachment stuff. You're having a hard time with your parents. I mean, okay, obviously you get it. This is how I see the whole world. I see the whole world through this lens. all close relationships.
Okay. So this is different in my mind. This is different from like the category of attachment parenting. Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
So it's a little confusing. The attachment research has been around since the 60s. The developmental psychology community started this research. John Bowlby, Mary Ainsworth, Mary Main, Harry Harlow. There's a bunch of, those are kind of the early pioneers of the research. And then at some point around the 2000s, there was this individual doctor named Dr. Sears who kind of took the term and loosely interpreted it and wrote a book called Attachment Parenting. And there was this attachment parenting movement that was like, kids should be in your bed and they should breastfeed. And there's some very specific things that actually are not correlated with secure attachment research. Have nothing to do with it. Like if you want your kids in your bed, great. If you want to breastfeed, great. I breastfed all 3 of my kids. Cool. But that is not what we have data on from the attachment research. The attachment research is about how does the experience with our caregivers early on in our life shape our sense of self, our sense of our relationship to our emotions, and our ways of relating to other people. That's attachment. Attachment parenting is like this one dude's version of what he thinks people should do when they're parenting. He's
Okay.
not the research. I love this clarification because a lot of people are like, oh, attachment. I'm like, oh, no, it's so much more than that. It's so rich and it's so good. Keep listening.
Yes. Because I think immediately people are like, oh, I don't do that. Or, oh, yeah, I'm already doing that. My kids are in my bed. So I wanted to just clarify that this is different. And then to me, this becomes the root of everything, is having a secure attachments with people and allowing people in, and whether it's kids or partners. So let's talk more about the idea of having secure attachments and what's the most important part of that.
Mm-hmm. So secure attachment is something that functions across our whole lifespan. So we can have a secure relationship as a child with our caregivers, but we can also have a secure relationship within a friendship or within adulthood. It is a relationship where we feel deeply seen, heard, and soothed. And in adult mutual relationships that we also see, hear, and soothe the other person. The early developmental piece is really important because it's how human beings form. Basically, we come out of the womb and we are helpless. We are like slugs. We can't do anything for ourselves. And we rely on a caregiver to help us continue to grow and be safe and regulate so that we can ultimately learn how to protect ourselves in the long run. But this relational form of development is why we have an attachment drive. So the instinct to move towards a caregiver as a small child and for the caregiver to move towards the child, that's the attachment drive, especially in moments of dysregulation and distress. So a child has a secure experience with a caregiver if their caregiver is very warm, very receptive to what they feel, highly responsive to what they feel, and able to attune. So if my child is crying and I say, "Ugh, you're so dramatic," well, I've just dismissed what they're feeling. I've misread what they're feeling. And now I'm not going to help them regulate. So that child over time is going to learn to shut down their cues. They're going to stop reaching for the parent because they want to stay close to the parent and they don't want to lose that parent. And so they're going to do what they think they need to do in order to maintain connection with the parent. Right? Whereas a secure experience, a child cries and the parent goes, "Oh, Munchkin, what's wrong? Are you sad? Or did that scare you? The kitty scared you." Instead of, "You're fine. You're fine. The kitty didn't hurt you." And maybe even there's a secure way to say, like, "You're okay. You're okay. I got you." But that's still attuned. It's still responsive. It's still gentle, right? There's a sense of, I care about what you feel matters, and I'm going to help you get through it.
Right.
And then with adulthood, as we enter into other relationships, that sense of security or insecurity, we carry that into our relationships. Our expectations of what other people will do with our tender feelings, our sense of confidence about our feelings and needs, our ability to even notice our feelings and needs. All of that starts in that early attachment formation. But what's amazing about attachment is that it's not a diagnosis. It's not genetic. It is something that can evolve throughout your entire life. So you could be 82 listening to this podcast. And as we talk through some of the more of the details of how different attachment patterns play out, you could go, "Oh my gosh, I've had an avoidant attachment pattern my whole life. I don't want to do this anymore." And I'll kind of guide you through, now what? And here's what you do. And you can deeply change how satisfying and meaningful your life and relationships are from that point forward. So it's
Ooh.
pretty awesome.
Well, let's do it. Let's talk about some of those attachment patterns. And
Great.
actually, I would just want to ask a specific question first. So there's the caregivers and the parents, where we're creating this
Mhm,
bond
mhm.
or this relationship to begin with. Do you have any insight or research on what role siblings play in this?
That's a really important question. We don't have great data on that, but a sibling is not an attachment figure in the same way that a parent is an attachment figure. Now, unless a parent is unable to be an available attachment figure and you happen to have a sibling who's older than you and for whatever reason, highly sensitive, highly caring, highly warm, then they might play an attachment figure role for you where you get some of that security from them. I have definitely known people who, when you evaluate their caregivers and how their caregivers responded to them, the obvious thing that has happened is an insecure experience, but they have somehow learned security through the process of banding together with siblings or having grandparents, neighbors. So you may have an insecure experience with your parents, but have gotten security somewhere else. How cool is that? So you might have an uncle and an aunt who really invested in you. And when you were around them, you really felt seen and heard, and they were around enough to make a difference in your sense of self. I do think that sibling dynamics can affect how your caregiver responds to you. So if you have a sibling that is, let's say, deeply traumatized by something else in their life, which was an experience of mine. I had a brother who had trauma outside of our family that was pretty massive in his world. And so that led to a lot of dysregulation for him. And his dysregulation often got aimed at me. And the dilemma my parents felt in that definitely contributed to some of the insecurity I felt because they weren't able to help me and they weren't able to help him. And so we were kind of lost in this mess. But it wasn't necessarily my attachment to him that was the problem. It was that my parents didn't know how to help him, which then affected me. Does that make sense?
Yes, I think that's exactly what I was wondering about that dynamic is if you have a secure attachment to a parent and then there's just a lot of chaos or sibling
Mhm.
rivalry or like you said, like a sibling struggling. So then, I came in as the peacekeeper, just kind of
Mhm.
wondering how much of a role that played out. Cause I know a lot of people in our community, there's plenty who are very aware of like, oh, I had this extremely traumatic childhood. And then
Yes.
there's plenty who are like me, where I'm like, it kind of seemed perfect on paper. I don't know. I don't know where I
Mhm.
got all the stuff I got.
Right, right. Well, so okay, there's lots of components that interact with it. So the attachment relationship between a parent and a child is driven by the parent's capacity, but it is also affected by the child's temperament. So if you have a highly sensitive child, they need more from you than a child that is maybe more typical in terms of sensitivity. Now, this particular parent might have a capacity to help soothe and have a secure relationship with a typical child, but they don't have the capacity to do that with a highly sensitive child. That they just don't know what to do with someone that's wired differently from them. Or, as we're thinking about the whole world right now, like trauma happens right around a family system. Maybe there's a caregiver. I was thinking of a client who I adore, who I think she had a very secure experience until she was about 5. And then when she turned 5, her maternal grandmother died suddenly in a way that was traumatic. And that trauma threw her mother off her sense of stability. And so it was like pre-5 years old, the experience was there is a sense of safety and community and connection. And post 5 years old, her mom sort of just was gone. It's like she lost her grandmother and her mother in a way in that moment. So we're looking at, it's not just who is your parent, it's who is your parent in the context that they're living in. If you're in a war zone, parents are going to do the best they can, but no one's going to feel secure because the parent can't feel secure in that environment. The key would be once that person is out of that war zone, or maybe they've endured it for long enough, they know how to handle it, then they're able to maybe soothe a child, help a child process, be available, be attuned. So we're looking a lot at what's happening, and then what do you need to do in order to make it more secure? How can you move into a secure place if there is something that's really big and hard and happening? So a parent who, I know a lot of people who had siblings who struggled, but still had secure relationships with their parents because their parents had the capacity to hold both perspectives. So instead of it being, well, we're all going to focus on the kid who's hurting the most, the parent would crawl into the bed late at night with the other child and say, it's really hard. This is hard. How are you doing? I know you feel guilty because you do have friends, or you are feeling, confident about yourself. But like, I know it's also hard that, Ricky, it's so funny what names come into my brain. Ricky takes up so much space. That's hard. Do you need to cry a little bit? I missed your game because I had to take Ricky in again to, see his psychiatrist, or whatever the thing is.
And actually acknowledging it.
Mm-hmm. And holding it and attuning to it and having space for it. I don't feel a sense of blame on parents who don't have a capacity in some way, because I think life is hard. It is hard to be a parent. A lot of us parented through the pandemic. That was a whole other type of parenting that we were doing, right? So we can relate to what it is like to be in high stress or high grief situations and know that our capacity lessens, and so does the security. And that's not somebody's fault. That's tragic.
Mm-hmm. So Eli, with the work that you do you find it important to kind of pull those pieces together of what was going on in that childhood? I don't know if it's 0 to 7 or, early childhood, or are you like, okay, here's an avoidant pattern. We see it, we know what's happening. Cool. What happened back then? Let's work on the pattern. How do you look at that or address that?
Yeah. I always tell my clients, like, I'm so sorry, but we're going to have to talk about the hard stuff. Like, I wish so much there was a way to just reprogram without processing, but that's not the way the human brain works. And we have data that shows the most effective way to earn a secure pattern, that's the language they use, is earned. I kind of wish they used the language of learned, because earned makes it sound like you're being good or something. Anyway, for those of us who didn't inherit a secure attachment pattern, in order to move into security, we do need to look back and process what we experienced as children in our caregiving relationships. And a lot of people will say, well, I don't remember very much. And I'll say, well, you may not remember a lot, but the pieces that you do remember probably tell us a lot. Was there warmth? Was there attentiveness? Was there silliness? Was there a sense that someone really knew how to read you and understand you? Or was it kind of awkward or numb or cold or frightening? What did it feel like? If you imagine being back in those early places, you're back at your home as a child, maybe you're 0 to 5, maybe you're 7 to 12, maybe it doesn't, honestly, we can go back to any of those places and they can evolve and change. So sometimes, again, security could happen when you're younger and not when you're older, or vice versa. My story is that from 0 to about 8, my experience was very insecure. And then about 8 years old, my mother went and checked herself into a psychiatric hospital and got help for undiagnosed bipolar 2 disorder. And she shifted. She still had struggles. She still had serious PTSD. She had lots of years to work through some things, but she was not the same after that. And there was a trajectory of healing in my family and in my life. So as I process, the grief of my own childhood, there are stories of me finding my mom curled up in like the closet of our basement, just sobbing when I was probably like 4 years old. I can remember that. There's grief that had to be held for that. And the amount of anxiety I had of knowing she wasn't okay and worrying about her. But then there is also relief in my story. So every story is unique, but we have to go back and we have to allow ourselves to process, what did it feel like in relationship to our caregivers? And then we have to let ourselves grieve whatever needs to be grieved. And maybe it's that our caregivers were really warm and receptive around certain topics and certain needs, but not other topics and other needs. Like maybe it was okay to be sad, but it wasn't okay to feel frustrated. Maybe it was okay to talk about the mean thing that someone said to us, but we definitely certainly could not talk about the fact that our cousin sexually abused us because our parents didn't know what to do with that. So processing through in a way that allows us to see our child self with compassion, understanding, and care. Like to look back, I look back at little Eli and I'm like, oh, honey, you were just so little and you were taking care of so much and you felt scared because there wasn't really anyone there who was able to give you a sense of security. How sad. I'm so sorry. When I did my own work, it took me a long time, partially because some of this information wasn't out there in the way it is now. I'm in my 40s now, and I did this work in my 20s. And I had a session with one of my therapists where I was doing this exact thing. I was going back into a particular home. I lived in 2 primary homes growing up, and I was going back and I was walking through the hallways and in my mind and allowing myself to kind of remember what it felt like. And at some point, I just stopped in the middle of the hallway and started bawling my eyes out. And in my therapist's office, I cried so hard, I literally threw up in her trash can. And afterwards, it was like it got out. Like I remember being like, oh my gosh, like that was it. Like that was the anxiety I've been carrying in my dating relationships. Like that was the little voice in my head that's like, are you going to leave me? Am I going to be alone? Am I going to be by myself? Are you sure? Are you sure? Are you sure I'm good enough? Well, what if you like someone else now? Or what? That was this younger part of me that had to like wander through my house going like, is everything okay? What's going to happen next? Where is everybody? What should I do now? That felt so scary. How do I fix it? And just like emoting all of that energy out shifted something in my nervous system. And it wasn't just that one session. There were many sessions that led up to that session, other stuff. But I think my hope is that people recognize that it is possible to allow yourself to grieve in such a way that your body now feels like that is over. Instead of feeling like this is me, it feels like this is something that once happened to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've experienced that exact same thing. I actually threw up as well. So
I mean, I was gonna say that's amazing, but like
I think it's rare. That's a lot of energy when you actually get to something like that.
And it takes courage. It takes a lot of courage.
Oh gosh, yeah.
You have to trust your body. You have to trust that you're not going to drown under that amount of sadness.
That's usually that's the fear I ran into most doing work for myself and will feel here with clients is that like, oh, well, once I open up this Pandora's box, will I, 1, be able to handle it? Will 2, be able to put it back together to go do normal life?
Will it be worth it? Is this worth it? Because it's hard. I mean, I always think about climbing mountains because in my younger years, I was a backpacking guide and I would lead people up these peaks. And the experience of being, at the beginning of the peak is like, okay, you know what, let's do this. And I see that with healing. People are like, okay, I'm so tired of feeling insecure. I want to heal. Like we got our boots on, we got our Cliff Bars, we got our water bottle. Let's do this thing. But like halfway up, you've got blisters, you've eaten all your snacks, you're a little bit sunburned and also windburned, and you can't see the top still. And you're like, what am I doing here? Why are we doing this? Is there even an end? And so you need people along the way who've been up these peaks before to say, like, that's right, just keep going, just keep going. I'm here with you. We're heading somewhere. Because when you do get to that point, and I don't want to describe it as like one mountain because it's an ongoing journey, but when you get to a point in your healing process where you can see the whole valley with perspective, it's breathtaking. And the blisters heal. And you get down that valley to more Cliff Bars and more sunscreen and time to take a nap and rest and eat dinner and cook and reset. And then you get really good at climbing mountains. And at some point, you know to put duct tape on your heels, by the way, so that you don't get blisters. That's a little hiking hack for all my hikers out there. And you know how to utilize people in your world to help you process that pain. Please don't try and climb these mountains by yourself. We are not meant to heal alone. What is broken in relationship heals in relationship. I deeply believe that.
Beautiful. Eli, can you talk us through some of the most common patterns?
Yes. So
what to look for?
I'll just kind of generally let you all know that this comes from multiple different studies and research and longitudinal studies. So like what I'm talking about is not just like an online Cosmo quiz. What attachment pattern are you? Like this is deeply validated science. So from the developmental research, we know there are generally 4 patterns that we develop in childhood. And then I'll talk about how we look at them in adulthood. So the 4 patterns are secure. And by the way, these are super wordy, annoying words, but I'm actually going to narrow it down for you all, so you don't have to hear all the wordy words. But insecure or secure, insecure, resistant, which is sometimes referred to as anxious ambivalent for those of you who already know these words. But I'm going to say resistant, and I'll explain why later. Insecure, resistant, insecure, avoidant, and disorganized. The kids who have secure attachments, here's what they do when they are upset. This is the basic way to explain it. When a child is in distress or feeling tender, a secure child actively pursues closeness to their caregiver. They reach for support and connection and proximity, and then they easily receive that soothing. So they reach and they receive. Reach, receive. The resistant child actively pursues proximity to their caregiver in the same way the secure child does. They want their caregiver close, so they are reaching. But then when they get close proximity to their caregiver, they protest or they resist because they have caregivers who are not predictably available. So this child has become hyper vigilant in their caregiving relationships. They believe it is their job to constantly watch other people in order to create the connection, in order to keep somebody close. And so when that person does get closer, they protest that response or that attempt to soothe them because they are internally afraid that if they soothe, that person will go away and they won't be able to find them again. The third category is insecure avoidant. These kiddos, so I said the secure was reach and receive. The resistant is reach and protest or reach and reject. The dismissive, the avoidant child ignores their inner needs because they've learned very early on that there's no reason to pursue the caregiver. The caregiver is unable to be helpful in moments of distress. Their caregivers are either dismissive or avoidant themselves, or they are so highly anxious that they are intrusive in their responses to distress. So this child has learned the best strategy for coping with my distress is to swallow it and not show it. And so their words are avoid and distract. They are going to avoid their inner pain and their distress. They're also going to avoid others when they are in distress, and they're going to cope by distracting themselves. And then the fourth category are these little munchkies who grow up in families where their caregivers are frightening. So our attachment system is designed to help us feel safe by being in proximity of caregivers. The secure child actively creates that proximity through reaching and receiving. The resistant child actively creates that proximity through reaching and then resisting soothing in order to keep their caregiver close. The avoidant child is actually keeping their caregiver close by not showing what they feel. That is their strategy for closeness. They're not avoiding attachment. They're avoiding burdening their parents with their emotions and needs. This category of kids, this disorganized, this fourth category of children, is in a pickle because there is not a safe person in their world. All three of those other parents, though not all secure and not all effective, are safe. The disorganized child has caregivers that are in some way frightening or dangerous to them. So they're either abusive, neglectful, severely mentally ill, like untreated schizophrenia, untreated bipolar, like bipolar 1, like deeply unstable in their ways of relating and acting and behaving. And so these poor little munchkins, they don't get to develop a way of utilizing relationship because they don't have that option. And so they instead have to move into hypoarousal or hyperarousal. Whoops, I did that the opposite on the screen. You all can't see that probably, but they either shut down or they move into deep fight, flight reactivity because there is nowhere to go. There's nowhere to turn when they're upset. And so we often see folks that have disorganized experiences in childhood struggling severely with addiction and serious PTSD and maladaptive patterns in their relationships because when they feel upset and stressed, they simultaneously are afraid of their attachment figures, which is a mind scramble. Okay, so we transfer all that into adulthood, right? A child who is secure gets to move into their sense of self, feeling confident that their needs matter. They get to believe that they are worthy of connection and compassion. They are able to choose people who are warm and supportive to them and walk away from people who are toxic or harmful to them. Because in their brain, it makes sense that close relationships should be warm, connected, and attuned. They are also highly responsive to other people. So when other people are upset, their natural inclination is to give empathy and support. This is what I want for all of us. I mean, as I'm describing that, I feel kind of proud of myself. I'm like, I am that now. That's so nice. I wasn't always that. I'll tell you what I was when I go through the other three categories. But that is why I wrote the book I wrote, is because I thought everyone needs a how to get there process. Adults who were resistant as children are called preoccupied in adulthood. So they feel deeply obsessed within the context of their close relationships. They are always wondering if something is wrong. They need lots of reassurance because their internal narrative is, I am too much. Other people aren't enough. I'm going to be dropped in some way emotionally in this relationship. And so I need to hypervigilantly scan other people for their feelings, their emotions, their responses. And I'm going to really struggle when they give me reassurance to trust them, to believe it, which this becomes problematic because if I can't trust the people I'm close to and I constantly badger them for more reassurance, eventually it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. The people I'm with are like, enough already. I've told you 1,700 times that I love you. Maybe I don't love you. Maybe you're right. This isn't working. There's something that feels insecure here that doesn't work with me. That was my pattern as a child. I was a resistant child and I had a preoccupied pattern into my 20s. I felt really confident in a lot of other areas of my life, but when I entered into close relationships, specifically romantic relationships, it was like I just became a pile of anxious goo. I couldn't feel my sense of worthiness in that context. The avoidant children grow up into what we consider a dismissive adult pattern. Dismissive adults really struggle to pay attention to what they feel and to manage what other people feel in relationships. They tend to create superficial relationships where they are around people and they are loyal and they love people and they get attached, but where they don't know how to go into those deeper, more authentic spaces. We know that the brain pattern of someone with an long-term avoidant pattern is actually lower cell density in their hippocampus. And our hippocampus is the part of our brain that helps us notice and process emotional experiences. So folks with a dismissive style actually truly have a hard time remembering what was said or asked during emotional moments. Very opposite of that resistant, preoccupied person who can remember every stinking detail of every emotional moment because it circulates constantly through their brain until it resolves. But this person really does struggle to create deep, close relationships, and their partners and the people in their life often say things like, I can't tell what you're feeling. I don't know if you actually care about me. Does this even matter to you? And the truth is, a lot of those things do matter. It's just hard for this person to stay in emotional states for very long or communicate emotions on their face or actively, because that old thing says the kindest way to love someone is to protect them from the burden of my emotional messiness. And so then there's often a pressure for other people to do the same thing. Like, why are you burdening me with your emotional messiness? Let's all just, go watch TV and move on, right? Move on, meaning ignore it and avoid it and don't deal with it and let it fester. And then folks with a disorganized pattern often end up in cycles where they are very clingy to their partner in moments, and then very pushy. So it's kind of like, if you've heard the term used around borderline personality disorder, I hate you, don't leave me. I believe that all personality disorders at their root have disorganized attachment experiences, because it is in our attachment experiences that we develop our sense of interpersonal relating. And personality disorders are all about sense of disruption to interpersonal skills and interpersonal relating. So yeah, that was a mouthful. That was a lot. What questions do you have about all that?
Gosh, so many thoughts and questions and people are roaming through my head.
Totally.
Okay, so let's say someone discovers, or they're listening and they're like, oh yes, I am 100% avoidant, or right, one of these patterns. So I'm assuming there's something in your book that's going to help us, and just give us some starter tips of where would you go with this information.
Well, let's say someone has concluded they're avoidant. What I would say is our long-term goal is to increase the window of tolerance you have for feeling states. So we want you to, when you feel a little feeling and that little prickly, uncomfortable feeling comes up into your body, I want you to try really hard to notice it and feel it longer, as opposed to what that old pattern is of avoiding it. I walk through a lot of this in my book. Kind of what I described earlier is that we're going to reflect on, hey, what do we know about your family system growing up? And we don't always know all that much. We might just know that it was not a warm fuzzy. You might not know that your father's father sexually abused him, and that's why he never touched you. You might not know that your mother grew up in a home that was so deeply fundamentalist in their religious beliefs that she came to think that the most important thing you do for a child is you teach them not to need warmth and affection from you. Like, we don't always know what drove the avoidance in the generation before us, or the generation before them, or before them, but we can look back and say, what was my experience? And if it wasn't warm, attentive, attuned, and connected, then we know there is some form of unresolved trauma that was being passed down in that family system in an unresolved way, meaning that no one was talking about the trauma or processing it or feeling it. It was just getting passed down in the coping pattern, and the coping pattern was avoidance. If you are, I'm, in my camp of things, and you go, oh, my default setting is resistant and preoccupied. You want to kind of evaluate, what was it happening in my world that made it so that my parents weren't able to be consistently available to me? Was it a sibling that was a hot mess that took up all the space and time? Was it a mental illness my parents struggled with sometimes and other times didn't? Was it addiction, something going on in the morning time versus the nighttime versus the middle of the day? What was it that made it so that I couldn't consistently rely on my parents? Another category I think that happens a lot is, was my mother in an abusive relationship with my father, or vice versa? And so when the other parent was in the room, they weren't allowed to connect with me because it threatened that parent, right? And so they were available to me only when that other parent wasn't around, something like that. So you want to look back, what was it? And then you want to begin to learn to heighten your focus on the affection, on the warmth, on the consistency that people give you in your life now. I think of it as like, if you're a honey badger, you're constantly looking for more honey. This is like, okay, you need to start sitting down, opening the honey and actually eating it. Like you've stockpiled enough honey, learn how to taste the honey and be nourished by the honey. You could have a honey journal where every day you write down like the 7 or 8 things that the people that you love did to show you love or support, instead of what you have this like ongoing running list of like the 7 possible pieces of data that might mean they don't love you. Right. So you're trying to draw your attention away from that hypervigilance and towards a sense of letting yourself learn to be soothed and reassured. If you are like, oh yeah, I have a disorganized style, I simply do not feel safe in close relationships and I react, I shut down or I blow up in moments where I feel scared or tender, you absolutely need to be in the care of a trauma-informed, attachment-focused, deeply warm and accepting therapist. If you have a therapist that you're not sure is warm, find another therapist. Like it needs to be someone that can help you feel what it is like to be in the care of a person who is genuinely available and genuinely consistent and not out to hurt you, harm you, shame you, humiliate you. Yeah. And then if you're secure, you can always work on being more secure. We all have those areas, we have times, seasons of our life where it's like, how present am I being? I mean, for me in my life right now, I have 3 children. I have a big job going on in my world, lots of different things I'm doing. It's very easy for me to get caught up in the tasks of life, like, okay, we've got to make sure that this is mailed out, not there. And I have to remind myself sometimes like, stop, pause, look at your child, look at your partner, wrap your arms around, even if it's for 25 seconds, but do it in a long 25 seconds, right? Like that attentiveness where you really truly like stop the rest of the world spinning around you and you're just there, to increase that sense of security between you and the people who matter the most to you.
You said something earlier I just want to highlight and come back to if anybody's listening to this and starting to go like, oh shoot, I've been doing this to my children, or right, the idea that this can always be shifted.
Yes.
And I heard something somewhere, Eli, and I think you've said a different percentage, but it's like if you can be there for your kids 50% of the time when there's a rupture or something happens, then they can still be.
Yes. This piece of data, it gets used a lot in different ways. And I honestly, I'll tell you my current grasp on the data, and I've been trying to dig in, and eventually I'm going to get Ed Tronick to come on my own podcast so that I can say, let's break this down, because it gets used in so many different ways. But the statistic that I understand from his longitudinal work around the still-faced experiment and follow-up studies is that we need to be emotionally and relationally in sync with our children 30% of the time. So if 30% of the time we are responsive, we are attuned, and we are safe. I mean, if you're attuned 30% of the time and the other 30% of the time you're throwing your child or partner against a wall, that is not going to work. Like, you also have to be safe. But if 30% of the time you are present, you are connected, you are warm, you are receptive to their tender feelings, they will experience security. And I think that makes a lot of sense because human beings have a lot to do to survive, right? Like, we have to eat, we have to, deal with stressors in our environment. We have to think about how to keep ourselves safe, and accounted for. It's winter. It just started being winter here today, and I'm cold. And I always do this. I think about my ancestors and I think, how did you do this? You were like breastfeeding a baby and it was freezing outside in a cave. And then I cry a little because I just think that must have been so horrible. But we have always had many, many tasks at hand for survival. And so our attachment system, I think, adapts for that and understands that, and children understand that. So we don't have to be perfect and on all the time. And we're not. We are not. Nobody is. I'm the attachment nerd, and I get super cranky with my 3-year-olds at bedtime right now because they are just so full of energy at the exact moment that I need them to be unconscious.
Please sleep.
please. Yeah. So it's about being a good enough caregiver and attachment figure. And the other key component to that is, are we able to take leadership on repair? So when we are off with our partners, with our children, please do not wait to be the initiator. Please do not keep score over who said sorry first. More often, just initiate repair. Hey, I'm so sorry. I was rough and cranky and crusty. I wasn't listening. I didn't pay attention. I know I could tell that really hurt your feelings when you were telling me about your day, and I kept scanning my phone. Like, I was kind of having a panic attack about X, Y, or Z, and I wasn't there for you. Like, can I have a do-over? I want to hear again. And this time I really want to be really present with what it is you needed me to hear.
The repair and then the unpredictable. So I think you said 30% of the time. And although that would not work if the other 70% you're on the extreme end.
Yes.
And I have heard, right, the unpredictability is one of the hardest patterns for kids, right? Like if your caregiver was angry all the time, you would learn you would probably avoid them. But if you're like, I don't know which one's going to happen, and I love the fun, exciting one, and the angry one scares me.
Yes. So when we talk about unpredictability, again, I want to highlight that we're not talking about small minor lapses in, like, you got frustrated with your child because they weren't listening to you, or you were on the phone when they stubbed their toe and you had to finish that phone call before you could reach them 1.5 minutes later to give them comfort. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about a parent who goes in and out of different mental states. So they are sometimes believe that your pain matters and they are able to be responsive and caring to it. And then they have like other funky mindsets that get in the way of them responding to you. And like I said, that's why I brought up alcoholism and serious mental illness. In my childhood experience, my sweet mama, in her mental illness, she would have periods of time where she felt worthy and she felt okay. And so her responses to us were based on that. But then when she had like serious episodes, like depressive or hypomanic episodes, her brain would just start working differently and her perspectives were different. And so we might throw a tantrum about not getting something, like all children do. In a healthy state, she would be able to see us as a child and respond to us as a child. In an unhealthy state, maybe a more martyry response, like, I can't believe you're doing this to me. You're being spoiled, or you're not, or I'm a terrible mother. That was really hard for me as a kid. I'm failing you. Obviously I'm failing you. I'm doing something wrong, like that kind of stuff. So it's not just, hey, you were a little crusty and cranky and that was unpredictable for your child, because we're all crusty and cranky. It's switching in and out of mental states that really affect the way you respond to your child. And that is the core of war crime torture, intermittent reinforcement. And that's what you were highlighting before. So if I don't know what to expect, I never get to let my guard down. I never get to put a guard up, right? If you're mad all the time and you're angry and scary all the time, I can at least disassociate and cope with that. But if you are sometimes very attentive and understanding and other times aren't, then I'm going to get in this perpetual cycle where I'm trying to get you to be the thing I need from you. And then I'm surprised and shocked and disoriented when you're not that.
So for the person who has experienced that over time, so like my oldest daughter, she does not like when my husband when he repairs, when he comes and apologizes, she actually gets really irritated.
Is it something about the way he does it?
She said to me, how about you just stop doing the thing that you have to then say you're sorry for?
Yep.
And I believe she has a very secure attachment. When you were talking earlier, I'm sure there's other things in there. And when you're talking earlier about, she's really quick to have friends that no longer in her life. If she thinks she'll be like, no, I'm like, oh my gosh, but do you want to give them a chance? She's like, no, they're toxic. And she's just like, done.
Yep. That's just her personality. Would you describe her as a strong-willed child?
Yes.
Okay. Because I also think that kind of what you're describing is a bit of a temperament thing and not even an attachment thing. So in her temperament, her repair process is still very boldly like, I'm going to watch you while you improve. I think that's more about who she is, versus it being about something being wrong in the attachment. Also, what's important to know about attachment is that our drive is really designed for those moments when we're in distress and tenderness. And I use those words because those are the words used in the research. But frustration isn't always distress. And it doesn't always activate our attachment patterns. It can activate other things. So kids will often run away when they are mad. And that doesn't mean that they're being avoidant in that moment. They're actually adaptively leaving a situation that's dysregulating them in order to calm down, in order to prevent themselves from doing something they know would be more dysregulating, like hitting somebody or whatever. So when my kids like are really mad because I've said no to something, or because their sibling has taken something away, and they run into their rooms and slam their door, I see that as a secure choice in that moment. And I gently move towards where they are, and I give a minute or so for them to feel that their space is being respected, because what they have indicated is that's what they need right then. And then I sit next to the door and I knock and I say, hey, I'm here and I'm ready to be with you if you want me, but if you need more space and time, that's okay too. I'll be right here. And I'm signaling to them that when the tenderness does come, because usually the tenderness comes, now I am available to them. And it's different every time. Sometimes they're still so heightened, they're like, and other times they are able to say like, okay, or like, they don't say anything. And then I open the door a little further. Do you want me to come in, or you want me to give you some more time alone? So I think just know that if you have a child that doesn't always want you to hug them when they're upset, that can be a sensory thing, not even an attachment thing. Or that could be because they're in a place of frustration, not in a place of tenderness and distress. But they're two different states.
That's a good distinction. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
I have one listener question I want to make sure I get in for Katie. So she wanted me to ask you, how do I allow my kids to have their independence and be free without being worried about them?
Oh, mama. I don't know.
Just a small question for the end.
No, I don't think we can not be worried. I think that's part of the attachment design. Our brains are designed to help our children move out into the world and experience the world, but also to be aware of the vulnerability of the world. And when they are especially in stages where they're making new leaps of independence, we feel new leaps of anxiety, because we are getting used to and studying what they really can handle and what they can't handle. And it's just nerve-wracking. I would say talk to your friends about it. Like, take care of your own nervous system. Don't expect yourself not to worry, but also don't sit in the worry, and don't Google all the possible things that could go wrong when a child is on a play date, right? Or whatever the thing is. Like, call a good friend, call someone who's a support in your life. Like, hey, I'm feeling nervous about this. Can you reassure me that like most kids go out into the world and do these things and come back totally intact? That's the most likely outcome. And I kind of just reassure myself in general with life. Like, that's how I get into my car, right? I get into my car and I go, yeah, there's a lot of accidents and there are fatal accidents, but like most car trips and all of the car trips that I've experienced so far have not been fatal. I am still here. And so I'm going to do my best to drive safely. I'm going to put my seatbelt on. I'm going to teach my kids about the things that they need to know in order to be equipped for the scenarios that they're entering into. And then I'm going to do my best to listen to the song on the radio and not think about what my body would do if I was jackknifed by a semi-truck. Right? We all do this in other areas of our life. And so it's okay to do it in our parenthood too.
That's awesome. Okay, tell us where to find your book and where to find more information about you. I know everybody's going to,
sitting with my book. I'm so excited.
So beautiful and exciting. Congratulations, by the way.
Okay, thank you. Let me explain that this book is not for parenting. This book will help your parenting, but it is not a parenting book. So it is designed as a workbook, so that all that work I told you needed to do, I literally have made it easy for you. I have all the questions. There's a bunch of quizzes to help you understand, reflect, process, grieve. And then the last section of the book is a how-to. How do you develop secure relationships? The book is primarily focused on partnership and friendship, because when I think about what I want my clients to do in order to give themselves and their partners and their children what everybody needs, step 1 is heal yourself. Step 2 is get the kind of connection you need in your life to be a well-regulated person. And then step 3 is learn secure parenting strategies. So this book is step 1 and 2 for you. And I am almost finished with my second book, which is step 3, but that won't be coming out for a little bit. But so this is book 1, securely attached. And then book 2 is going to be securely attached parenting. So we'll deep dive into all of the how-tos. And book 2 is a bookie book. It's not a workbook. So go get the workbook, do your work so that by the time book 2 comes out, you'll be ready.
Be ready.
If we don't work on our nervous systems first, then all of the efforts that we make on everything else fall flat. Because even if I say to you, I'm here for you, I've got you. Let me do that again. If I say to you, I've got you, it'll be okay. It'll be okay. It doesn't matter that I said I got you, it'll be okay. My energy said I'm freaked the fuck out.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah. So whether you're a parent or you're not a parent, book 1, go get it. It's on Amazon, it's on Barnes & Noble, it's on Books A Million. It's basically everywhere. If you head to attachmentnerd.com/books, there's a link that takes you to all the links. So you can pick your retailer of choice. And also on Attachment Nerd is my membership, which Megan was talking about, with classes, courses, virtuals, Q&As, village support. We would love to have as many of you there as possible. If you go pre-order my book and you send an email to me at hello@attachmentnerd.com with a picture of the receipt of the pre-order for this book's out in 3 weeks, by the way, so it's almost out. But if you go and you pre-order it in the next 3 weeks, I will give you a code from that email for 50% off all of my membership stuff. Because everybody in there.
You all are going to want that. It's awesome. Go do it.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much for being here. This was amazing and so incredibly enlightening and helpful. So I appreciate the work you're doing.
So glad. So glad.
Thanks for coming to hang out with us on the podcast. It is our goal to lead others through accelerated transformation that takes all parts of ourselves into account. And we need your help. We need your help to get the word out. At almost 2 million downloads and quickly heading to 3, we know that as this podcast grows, we're going to be able to reach more and more people and help them learn how all 4 bodies, physical, mental, emotional, and energetic, work so they feel empowered to be, do, and have whatever they want in life.
If you find this podcast helpful, please take a moment to text 5 friends you think might benefit and leave us a review. It means so much to share this work that has transformed our lives with others. We appreciate your help so much and can't wait to see you next time.